Make sure my audio's on. Would Zelensky order a superficial attack on Chernobyl to gain support at the Munich Security Conference? I do believe that's what we're looking at tonight. That happened to Chernobyl a few days ago. We started off the show last night with no audio. Yeah, here we go. Ready or not. So there was a bunch of stories. I almost ignored it. I was like, oh goodness, I don't want to cover it. I don't even care. And I said, oh well, I'm an idiot. I better start looking at it. It was a lot bigger story than I thought it was going to be. We got some tidying up to do just before we go full tilt into this story. We cover a couple of pieces from yesterday I forgot to cover. And we got 157 dead whales I want to touch up on quickly. And in Australia and Tasmania, radioactive leak possible at Chernobyl nuclear plant. Radioactive leak. Every time I hear the word leak, I'm not a very happy camper. So I'm going to put it on the bigger screen because a lot of people watch it on tablatures and everything else. I fixed the Geiger counter up there. That's in real time. Because it's right here, you bump it and sometimes it's tilted. I don't know about on your end. On my end, it'll drive me nuts if I see it tilted. So this was allegedly, according to Zelensky, who was at the Munich Security Conference. They were about 2 hours into the conference. So all of these leaders worldwide, so-called leaders, all of these influential politicians were gathered up in one spot. So that was a prime time to stage an event, wasn't it? And so we're going to go way down that rabbit hole. We got tons of documentation. That's what ended up inside the building. That's allegedly the drone. But the explosion shows everything getting knocked out of the building, not in the building. And then when you look at the so-called drone, how hard is it for Ukraine to get their hands on pieces of a drone and put it at the top of... So this is the damage on the inside. This doesn't even make sense. And you can see there's a walkway up right there, right where the explosion happened. That's pretty convenient. It's not actually in the reactor sarcophagus itself. It's in the maintenance section. The whole thing is really hokey. It doesn't make any sense when you actually look at the documentation. It certainly looks like a false flag operation, and we're going to go down that road. Hello, welcome back, everybody. UN chief. Now we're going to cover a couple of little tiny pieces of information I forgot to put into the show from last night. I got it already included in our next show because we're going to do there's a lot more headlines today based on last night's story. And there was lots left over we didn't cover. And we forgot to, well, you didn't, but I forgot to do due diligence and dig up some documentation before I done the show last night. Not that it matters, I suppose, to the average person, but I think it matters to the regular people that come here. So remember this story from last night, UN chief to view contaminated Fukushima soil. In September of last year, they were going to view the water, and they picked up a $19 million check. Then they left and went over to South Korea. Done the same thing here. They picked up a $14.6 million check. But all the headlines were suggesting that they had made a special trip down to view the soil. There's 14 million bags. They said there's actually 30 million one-ton bags. We covered that last night. So go back to UN chief to view contaminated Fukushima. This is April 2023. The International Atomic Energy's role is to analyze and confirm the data provided by the criminal, not directly collect samples and verify them. That's quite a departure from what they're claiming today, isn't it? And yesterday. And I'll remind you on the water, but they also, the bags, International Atomic Energy Agency says public trust is the key to project using radioactive soil from Fukushima. It's nuclear waste. That's why you got 30 million one-ton bags. It's not just radioactive soil. It's actually particulates from the fuel. What was interesting about that story, and that story was also in 2023, was the international, that was August the 24th, 2023, when they allegedly first started dumping water. They looked at the alleged bags. So Grossi claiming that was his first time seeing it on all media as yesterday is simply not true. The International Atomic Energy Agency is not a regulator. Think about that statement. It's not a regulator, and it's not in a position to judge or approve Japan's soil recycling projects. And then Clark, and that's Clark right there, Anna, the scumbag Clark, noting that the group's task is to make sure Japan's plan is in line with the International Atomic Energy Agency, which is 195 militaries. Eisenhower described it as a military-industrial complex, United Nations. IAEA is just a puppet of the UN, right? And that's very important. We're going to jump right into the Chernobyl stories any moment here. I just want to play one little clip. We got the clips of the explosion. We're going to go through that shortly. But I want you to play this clip of George the Monster Bush, W. Bush. He's talking about UN, which is this. He's talking about UN, and he's calling them the New World Order, which is 195 militaries, right? NATO's 30. So I'm going to play that clip. I might have to turn the volume back up in a second, but we'll see.
We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order, a world where the rule of law, not the law of the jungle, governs the conduct of nations. When we are successful, and we will be, we have a real chance at this new world order, an order in which a credible United Nations can use its peacekeeping role to fulfill the promise and vision of the UN's founders.
So he's calling UN the New World Order. Imagine, if you will, a world run by psychopaths. They're actually cowards. I think we're giving them too much credit by putting them in that category. They're just inbred cowards from the nuclear industry, most of them, right? Okay, so before we get to that story, we got one more we want to cover. There's 157 whales dead after a horrifying mass stranding event in Australia. So they usually attributed the mass strandings only to pilot whales. These are what they call false killer whales. But as you'll see, it's every species of whales post-Fukushima showing up on the beaches in mass. About 157 whales randomly emerged on an Australian beach. Randomly emerged, eh? There was about 90 that had a chance of survival, but due to the complex conditions on the remote Tasmanian beach, the last remaining batch of whales were slaughtered. All 157 whales have died. No, well, 90 of them were murdered, right? Just call it what it is. Don't go sugarcoating it. We're big enough to deal with it. To just keep turning around and coming back towards the beach. 67 dead. Authorities euthanize 90/killed 90. It's very difficult to determine their health. I'm leaning definitely towards emaciation. To a defined spines, very thin tails. We're seeing peanut heads. We're seeing everything emblematic of emaciation, starving event. One of their useful idiots, she emphasized that the safety of both the animals and the staff was the top priority. Australian British, that's how they always talk. Eh? They're the strangest creatures on the planet. We decided slaughtering the whales was necessary for their welfare. However, Clark noted that the remote location made rescue operations equipment deployment difficult. NBC, a team climbing whale deaths sparked questions over offshore wind. So they're trying to blame the die-offs on wind turbines. And they quantify it by suggesting these numbers. An unusual mortality event began in, now they only acknowledge humpback whales for some reason, in 2016, still ongoing. We'll do a show on species die-off in the near future. We'll cover all of this again, but more details. Since January 2016, 244 dead humpback whales were found between Maine and Florida. Because there's over almost 10,000 dead humpback whales. So they don't want to mention that. They want to isolate it to where the windmills are, to the wind power generating facilities are. Really dishonest what they've done there. Clearly this humpback whale is emaciated. We're going to look externally over the whole body, everything, to see if there's any abnormalities or any wounds. Useless tit-sit. Prior to 2016, we had either no whale strandings a year or just one. Well, that's just in their little territory, by the way, they're talking about. They're suggesting the main cause of death we have seen are vessel strikes, or entanglement, or an infectious diseases. You'll understand why I'm laughing at that in a minute. 10 billion snow crab vanished off the Alaska coastline. That was caused by the food chain was broken. That's 4 times more than the entire fleet has caught in its history. It's the death of that industry. Did windmills cause that too, I wonder? But if you look at the number of vessel strikes in 2023, worldwide there was a report of 1,200 whales colliding with ships. Not all of them would have died. Or ships colliding with whales, dead whales, more like it. And the reason I say that is because, think about this headline from a couple of years ago. Did a marine heat wave cause 7,000 humpback whales to starve to death? So let me see, 7,000 whales died of starvation. We're only talking about humpback whales. And she said, however, if you scroll on social media, many blame the deaths on the phenomenon of wind turbines. So what if you do? That could be you. That could be just the pro-nuclear community trying to demonize wind, right? Remember, the plumes came into Fukushima at 1 million atoms per square meter underground, radioactive fallout of xenon-133. That model is only based on 20 days. Another study of 20 million particles per liter of radioactive fallout of iodine-131. There's 10 times more 132, 30 times more 133, 31 times more iodine-129s. The 132, 133 are 9 times more effective, ionizing and radiating the thyroid glands of all the species, including the whales. And it wasn't just humpback whales. Gray whales, now when they talk about climate change, it's the equivalent of saying Martians came down and killed it, because they don't define what caused the climate change, which is clearly 80 years of emissions from the nuclear industry. The radioactive plumes, invisible snowstorms every year from every direction, from 1,000 fuel pools, pulsing energy almost at the speed of light every second for millions of years. It never goes away, and every year you're releasing massive plumes again that never go away. That's called climate change. The gray whale population was over 10,000. And by the way, the 7,000 humpback whales were on top of the unusual mortality event. It's not just isolated to the United States. This is symmetrical wherever the humpback whales are worldwide. We're talking about over 10,000. And so the gray whales was over 10,350 in 2022. They still haven't stopped dying. And the majority of them were clearly significantly emaciated. All right, I think we're almost ready. And birth rates were down 40% in just the last year of 2021. All right, here we go. Russia strikes Chornobyl nuclear power. See, they can't quantify Russia done it. This happened during the Munich Security Conference. It was a superficial, and we'll go right through this whole story, and you'll see why I'm suggesting that's what happened. Radioactive leak possible. This simply wasn't true. This was MSN, which is a massive corporation and media, right? And they knew it wasn't true. And they knew when they seen the pictures that this was the maintenance area. This wasn't the reactor chamber, the sarcophagus itself. So it was very, very, very dishonest to suggest. And when you hear the word leak, there should be at least 100 nuclear scientists thrown off a skyscraper. There's no such thing as a leak when it comes to nuclear. When you look at the explosion close up, the explosion is outward, not inward. These are very robust buildings, by the way. This was a very, very big building, very expensive building. And that's the so-called engine of the drone, allegedly. But as we go through the documentation, you're left with a lot of questions, same as me and everybody else. That's the so-called hole in the roof. There's not really a hole in the roof. The explosion was placed above it in the insulation, and it peeled back some of it, but the majority of it, as you'll see coming up, is punched out. And the same thing with the video. As you'll see, it is punched out, not in. You see the debris, and we'll get some closer shots coming up. Sparks fear of a radioactive leak. The drone was carrying a high explosive warhead. Well, if it's carrying a high explosive warhead, why do we see next to no damage? If that's a high explosive warhead, I can do more damage with a homemade setup, right? Which I bet you that's what that is. They're so dishonest, and they're so dishonest all the time. According to Ukraine's President Zelensky, that's really interesting because all the stories, if they mention the sources, that's who they gave as the source, was Zelensky, which got the credibility of a fruit fly, right? The plant's chief engineer said that there was a possibility of a leak of radioactive substances, but the situation is under control. See, a nuclear event, you can't get control of it. It's a nuclear event. It's lethal doses, gamma shines, neutron bombardments, beta rays, alphas, X-rays. It's not something where you would say in one hand there was possibility of a release, and the other hand they got control of it. If you got control of it, well, how is there a possibility of a release, right? The video footage shows how the explosion blew a hole in the dome. And then they show you this stuff here. I got a little frog in my throat. Hang on a second. Hopefully that's better. That's parts of the buildings that were blown outward is what you're looking at. That's not part of a drone. And so I got the video there somewhere. I'm gonna play that in a second. I'll play the video. I'm gonna drag it in here just in case. So you see the explosion up in your top left-hand corner. That's an explosion outward, not inward. Right? That's, if you see any explosions at all, you know what's going on there. That's an explosion outward. And you'll see it tossing stuff way, way over. And let me just kind of set myself up a bit better here. So you're going to see a couple of pieces go all the way over here in a second. I'm going to play the video for you. There's two pieces up there, right? You see those two pieces? They're actually getting blown. There they are here right now. That's a very long distance, by the way. That's an explosion outward, not inward. Nothing adds up. So let me bring up the video. Because video is always fun, right? Everything, all the statements from the media, when you added it all up, it's a false flag. That's what exactly happened. Ukraine done it to blame it on Russia because the U.S. government has pulled out funding. They're at the Munich Security Conference. They got all these countries there. He's begging for money again. And the money's all disappeared. Clearly we know that now. The money has disappeared. And let's play this video. I'll give you a better context, hopefully. See the explosion? The explosion is outward and downward. See that? See the debris went down here? Let me go back and look at that again. I'm going to slow the video down. At a 50%. And watch the debris coming down on the ground. You'll see it in a second. See it trickling down? Well, it's more than trickling down. But see the explosion, right? You can see debris going behind me, flying away. But see right where my finger is pointing? That's actually debris that was punched out of the reactor building, the maintenance section of that building. And this is inside. So the damage doesn't match up to the explosion. The damage on the outside matches up to an explosion from the inside out, like a shape charge would do. And then they got an engine just sitting perfectly right there, laid up against it. They just walk up, take their pictures, and spread it all over the world. And then when you look at the damage up there, it doesn't resemble an actual, what they're suggesting it was. It doesn't have those particular attributes. Oh, excuse me. And it's a rather important story that we had a really important one last night. Russian drone strikes Chornobyl nuclear disaster zone. Zelensky shared footage of the aftermath on social media platform X, drawing attention to the devastating implications of the strike. So there was a lot of the media was heavily fear-mongering, and the drone was armed with a high explosive warhead. But when you look at the interior of the building from the inside out, that's not a high explosive warhead at all. Nothing even close to it. Struck the shelter that protected the world from radiation. See how they framed the narrative? Isn't that really something? Isn't that disgusting? Just like, why should you trust a journalist? You know, we cover the news cycle quite regularly, a 24-hour news cycle on nuclear, and there's not a single person that comes here regularly would shake the hand of a journalist, I can tell you that much. And he went on to condemn the Russians' actions, saying that the only country in the world that would attack such a site like Chernobyl, occupy a nuclear power plants, and wage war with no regard for the consequences is today Russia. So he's at the Munich Security Conference, and this is not just an attack on Ukraine, but a terrorist threat to the entire world. So he's hoodwinking with a false flag the security conference in Munich, right? That's exactly what he was doing. And I mean, look what he done to his own people. You know, the head of the former CEO of Google, Eric Schmidt, has a drone company that sells drones to Ukraine. And he makes $1 million a month, and they sell them to Ukraine at $400 a drone. And they're suicide drones. They chase the soldier around in circles until they blow him up. Imagine having that legacy. Like the horror of that statement. I'm going to play one of those videos, by the way. The horror of that statement is just pre-Russia was unimaginable. I happen to have a little small collection of that kind of stuff. Just a little collection. Let me see what we got here. You got Russian drones. You got the Ukraine drones. They're both using drones to attack each other. It doesn't matter which one we watches. These are very difficult videos if you're sensitive to this stuff, but it's very important stuff to acknowledge. And you can't acknowledge it until you actually see how sadistic. I'm going to stop it because I got to get rid of the music. It's very difficult stuff to watch, but it's everywhere, unfortunately. And this is what they're doing all day to conscripts who are not even soldiers. Here we go. See Buddy hiding? There's a drone chasing him down. Thought I had the music dead. My apologies. The drone just chases you down, and imagine being a drone driver. A lot of these are. Imagine being the person who's operating the drones. Don't worry, AI will take it over, but they have to have eyes on the target before they can give it to the AI. And then they still have to watch it happen. That's what Google's former chief, who's still an advisor for Google, is producing 1 million of those drones to chase people down and blow them up. Have you ever heard the expression, Google, don't be evil? And too late now, isn't it? And Eric Schmidt makes 1 million of those drones a year. Do you think it's not going to get worse? You know how sadistic that is to do something like that? Right, there's Geneva Conventions. There's all kinds of... You can't use certain weapons that might hurt innocent bystanders and everything else. But you can use a $400 drone with a bomb on it to chase the soldier who's clearly... I got so many videos of mortally wounded soldiers. They send in another drone to blow them up. And a lot of soldiers will commit suicide with a gun or use a frag bomb or something, a hand grenade, to blow themselves up before the drone comes in. I have those videos. I'm not going to play them for you. But at what point do we call... At what point do we call this... What point do we call this madness? That this is not acceptable, and that how can we ever look anybody in the face after letting them get away? And this is Zelensky when he was an actor before he became the president of Ukraine. That's him there. It's much worse than that. Like, it's so much worse than that. I got all kinds of videos of him before that. Let me see. The whole story is absurd. His wife just spent $4.5 million on a Bugatti. He's living high. He just bought Hitler's castle. We're living some strange times. And so he's making a lot of money. He doesn't want the war to end. He's the reason. And even Vladimir Putin is saying the same thing, that he's the reason. Ukraine says Russia drone attack hit Chernobyl's nuclear plant. Yeah, Zelensky did up on his Twitter account, and all the media's stories are based up on that single. Ukraine says Russia drone attack hit Chernobyl. Explosion heard at Chornobyl plant. The IAEA had people at the plant. They reported an explosion, but confirmed the radiation levels remain normal. None of the stories, by the way, none of them, had acknowledged that the drone hit the maintenance room and not the sarcophagus area. Right, the front of the building is the maintenance area. Right, it's segregated off from the sarcophagus area. And you can see all the debris punched out, not in. Look at this, peeled right back onto the roof. If that's not blatant, what actually is, I wonder? It was exploded from the inside out. A hole blasted by a drone in Chernobyl's radiation shield. What we know. Well, the drones are not meant to blow holes in buildings. They're meant to blow up a tank or blow up a group of people, right? They're not what they're claiming, right? So they don't have that particular capabilities, and they don't carry warheads. They carry explosives. Ukraine nuclear expert tells the war zone that they're concerned about the future effect of a drone strike on the radiation shield. But the spot that is damaged is not the radiation shield itself, it's the maintenance area in the front of the building, which not a single one of the 27 stories yesterday acknowledged. Not a single one acknowledged it. One expert expressed concern that in the worst case scenario, the ensuing repair work could require the entire containment structure to be rolled back on its tracks, exposing the destroyed inner core that was designed to the sarcophagus. Like, it's a hole in the roof, and on the inside, it doesn't look very bad at all. And whoever they're quoting would have known that. If they're the expert, they would have known the same as me and you are knowing right now with the simple documentation. The video and the pictures were out right away. Quite convenient. When the Munich security conference it was only 2 hours started, and that's when this happened. And then Zelensky was outraged, and he got on his Twitter, made sure everybody there knew. And then said Russia is a terrorist, ready to attack the whole world and radiate everybody. It's 100% staged false flag event by Ukraine. And all kinds of countries, including Canada, United States, contributed heavily to build that containment over that disease factory known as Chernobyl. One expert expressed concern that the repair work could require the entire containment structure. Really, all you do is get a couple of big sheets of plywood and bring up there and you're finished. That's all you really need, right? And some self-tapping screws. And job well done. spray some foam around the edges to seal it, and that's the end of it. It's the maintenance area of the building. It's not the actual sarcophagus part of the building. And video and images emerging in the aftermath show the fire as well as remains of the drone that fell into the facility. We showed you that earlier. We'll show it again coming up. Russia drone strikes hits the shell of the Chornobyl nuclear reactor. A Russian drone with a high explosive warhead. Yeah, really? Rescuers localized fire at the Chornobyl nuclear power plant confinement. The explosions from the inside, that's why you see the debris outside, like it is, peeled backwards. If it hit and blew up, right, it wouldn't create that type of damage at all, see? Any forensic investigative journalist would have known that. And Ukraine foreign ministries insist that Russia must be completely isolated in the nuclear energy sector following the attack on Chernobyl. So Ukraine's foreign ministry insists, clearly at the Munich Security Conference, where they had an audience, that Russia must be completely isolated in the nuclear energy sector. This nuclear industry is the biggest threat humanity is facing right now. When you consider the releases from 1,000 fuel pools every day worldwide, and the fact that we're now looking at an extinction event because of Fukushima. High above Chernobyl, this is the degenerate New York Times. So this was the first story I read. And I instantly disrespect these people who wrote it. High above Chernobyl, workers grapple with ice, fire, and nuclear fears. The New York Times, which is owned by Amazon, right? After an apparent drone strike blew a hole in a protective shell, there's an urgent need to patch what covers the wreckage of the world's worst nuclear accident. How can Chernobyl, which was a new reactor, was 2 years old, it was using graphite, not like Chernobyl, with 4 reactors melted down, with 8 fuel pools melted down. Each fuel pool had 4 reactor cores in it. How, in the name of goodness gracious, can Chernobyl be worse than any of Fukushima reactors, let alone worse than all of them melting down? Disgusting. This industry is just, it's disgusting. By Kim the cunt and Brendan the prick. Excuse the Canadian in me. He said the hole from the strike was quite large, about 540 square feet. Yeah, 540 square feet of nothing. You're still nothing. 540 square feet. It's about 10 feet across and about 12 feet wide. It's not even 540 square feet. Does the truth even matter? Just bear with me because I smurfed up. Now I got to get back on my spot here. The New York Times. That's still pretty disgusting what they done, though. Nope. Does that look like 540 square feet? Everything is peeled outwards, not inwards. There we go. We're back to where I'm supposed to be. Just so that don't happen again, let me just purge the first part of the show tonight. Because I got a tendency to accidentally lose my place here. There we go, we're good to go again. Maybe. Yeah, I'm back. So I couldn't highlight this story. Primarily because it jeopardized the safety of the protective shell covering reactor 4. It's not the piece that's over the reactor. It's the part of the building that is over the maintenance, which is the front part of the building. And anybody, any academic that the New York Times would have talked to about the story would have known that. And there wasn't a single one of the 27 stories yesterday that would acknowledge that for some reason. Because it doesn't paint the picture the military-industrial complex want to paint it, apparently. Despite the strike, the radiation levels at Chernobyl remain normal. Yeah, because it's not in the sarcophagus itself. Man. Everybody should email the New York Times and complain about this story. The Ukrainian authorities described the strike as audacious. Of course it is, because they've done it to themselves. Hitting a nuclear power plant on the eve, as 2 hours into the gathering of the world's leader in Munich, the security conference, risking a disaster. The Kremlin denied it, and why wouldn't they? Workers extinguished the fire early Friday, but the insulation still burned as of late afternoon. Well, clearly, when you're looking at the actual pictures, and I'll be showing to you some more pictures in a moment, that's not true. The head of the State Emergency Services of Ukraine, disgusting parasite, as he stood in the medium of the parking lot in front of Reactor 4, he said the hole will take months to fix. Really? That hole is going to take months to fix, is it? Really? You know why they stood up there? Because it's over the maintenance area, not over sarcophagus. There's nothing to inhibit them from fixing it. They just bring up a couple of big sheets of plywood and some 7-inch self-tapping metal screws. And then they bring up foam, just spray foam, sealed all the edges, or even epoxy, and go up in the summertime and just cut out that section and put in a proper piece, because it's over the maintenance area. It's not actually over the reactor. The $1.7 billion shell was damaged, but was completed in 2019, was built to help 45 countries. To make sure that a nuclear accident like the one that occurred in 1986 will not happen here again. The disgusting parasite, the New York Times. And then they brought in Greenpeace's Mr. Bernie from Greenpeace. So you know it's a false flag when they bring that guy in. It was brought in on railway tracks, scumbag Greenpeace said, at about 40,000 tons. It's the largest movable structure ever built. It's hard to like anybody in the nuclear industry, but lately it's impossible. More than a disaster area, much of the 1,000 square mile Chernobyl exclusion zone resembles a storybook forest. The snow doesn't care if it's a nuclear wasteland, dummy. Our team is rotating constantly to ensure no one is exposed to radiation, the fearmonger says. We understand snow is falling, rain is expected, water used during fire suppression has also become radioactive waste. How can it become radioactive waste when it's in the section of the building where there's maintenance? It's not in the sarcophagus part of the building. And if they're there, they knew it because they went and took pictures. They're the ones with the keys to go in and take the pictures that was distributed out to the media. So Ukraine purposely artificially inflated the significance of what was happening, and this is evident in all the stories. Chernobyl nuclear plant hit by explosion, the degenerate, disgusting, parasitic IAEA says. Chernobyl is the site of the world's worst. All the stories had that statement right there, obviously. How can you say Chernobyl is worse than Fukushima? Fukushima reactors, each one of them, not counting the fuel pools that are missing from the top of the buildings, are 100 times the inventory of Chernobyl. They're pure uranium, pure plutonium. And unlike Chernobyl, you can't build a sarcophagus over a building that doesn't exist. These are medias that are pretending they're on top 150 feet above that building. How can anybody ever watch the news? How does that work? How can you look at this stuff and then turn on your TV and watch the news? How can you ignore that after seeing that? How can you pretend that that never happened? Oh, well, news, I got to go watch the news. How do you get that complacent? Really, how does that work? How does your brain rationalize that you should watch the news after you realize the horrors that they're committing against you and your loved ones and your friends and your family and your planet? How does that work? Oh, you might have to roll the whole building back to fix a fucking hole that they knew they didn't have to do that to. Right? They artificially overinflated it because of the Munich Security Conference. I only defend the truth, right? That's what I defend. I don't defend any. I don't give a fuck about Russia. I don't give a fuck about Ukraine. I couldn't care less about Canada. I'm from Canada. I care about the truth. That's it. And I move on to tomorrow or the next show. It'll be a different story. We'll move on. We'll talk about the truth. That's all we're worried about. But this kind of nonsense, this false flag event, like this, a very dangerous thing to be doing, and they shouldn't be allowed to get away with it. And if you let them get away with it, then it's your fault when something happens, not mine. You're the problem, not me. I'm honest, you're not, right? If you hold them accountable, then you've done the best you could. Then you can look in the mirror, like I can. Drone attack on Chornobyl nuclear plant casts as a shadow over. I'm talking to my detractor and the people that have never been here before. Drone, clearly not to the regular people that I absolutely adore. Drone attacks on Chornobyl nuclear plant cast a shadow over the prospects in Ukraine. They show you that picture. And then any explosive, any kind of expert, architect or engineer looks at this is going to say, hey, well, the explosion is from the inside out. You don't have to be an educated person to appreciate everything is blown out, not blown in. The site of the world's worst nuclear accident. How can Chernobyl be worse than Fukushima? And so every story was used to promote that narrative. You know, I remember I was on a research expedition in 2017 from Fukushima. We were on the ocean for 5 months doing species counts. And I was in this community, and the community knew what I was doing. And people actually, I started to get upset with me because they said that Chernobyl was worse than Fukushima. And I said, what are you talking about? And you couldn't reason with them. You couldn't actually have a conversation with them because they watch TV. And my experience over a very long period of time is that people that watch TV, like the medias, are irrational. I only look at the documentation. I don't give a fuck about propaganda. So when you look at reactor 4 over there and reactor 3 at Fukushima, remember that's a plutonium mixed oxide reactor. And at the top of the building was 2 fuel pools, which Chernobyl didn't have. And each fuel pool had at least 4 reactor cores into it. So how can Chernobyl be worse than a plutonium mixed oxide fuel reactor meltdown? And how can you look at that as a nuclear expert, knowing that the front of the building is the maintenance area for the sarcophagus itself, knowing that this is the front of the building, how can all the media who knew that, absolutely unequivocally, every story was showing tonight, every one of those media, so-called journalists, knew this was the maintenance area. The experts that they're quoting, especially from Ukraine, and the people that were there that they're quoting, knew this was the maintenance area. This is blown out. It's like 10 feet by 12 feet or something. A couple of sheets of plywood will do it just fine. Or just cut off the metal. The reason they're stood up there is because there's no radiation, because it's the maintenance area. A drone pierced the outer shell of Ukraine's Chornobyl nuclear plant, and that radiation levels are normal. Of course they're normal. They're above the maintenance area. Site of the world's worst nuclear disease factory. Of course, this is absurd to suggest that that's the worst area. But all the media done that is just It was a propaganda, and they took advantage of it. And then PBS, of course. Why would you ever trust PBS? Beyond me. There's the motor there. Look at that. If it had a high explosive, that motor wouldn't exist anymore, by the way. Chernobyl was hit by a drone. What are the dangers? Chernobyl, the site of the world's worst nuclear accident. They can't help themselves but be scumbags. That's who they are. That's why they got the job. I'm Dana, by the way. And you can call in on these live shows at 709. We're in Canada. 589-4406. I don't hide from anybody. I don't kiss the ring of anybody. I don't bow to anybody. I'm an honest person, and I do an honest day's work every day. And I don't pick sides. I just pick facts. If it's the truth, it's the truth. That's what it is, and I don't think about it. So how can 4 reactors that melted down in Japan, that actually detonated, and were completely gone, not be worse than Chernobyl? Especially when reactor 3 to your right is a plutonium mixed oxide fuel reactor. And just one more bit of context. That's a plutonium-239 dispersal. After 20 days, covered the entire planet. It doesn't stop at 20 days, mind you. Drone damage outer shell of Ukraine's Chornobyl nuclear plant. Russia denies the responsibility, which is appropriate. And they show you this picture. Look at this. That's the interior of the building. That's not the sarcophagus. Look up there, like a walkway. It's not very hard to put an explosive up there. And when you look at the damage, when you actually look at the damage, it's pretty clear that this was a detonation of outwards. The damage you're seeing inside of it is just superficial, right? Drone damages the outer shell of Ukraine's Chornobyl nuclear plant. CBS. Russia denies the responsibility. Site of the world's worst nuclear accident. How can you call Chernobyl worse than Fukushima? My goodness. That's not rational. Chernobyl nuclear reactor's protective shell damaged by a drone. And Ukraine accuses Russia. Well, because they were at the Munich security conference. It was up running for 2 hours. Zelensky, right, cokehead Zelensky, crackhead Zelensky is more like it, and serial killer. In the aftermath of the event, Chernobyl's chief engineer, who stood up outside the building, said the shelter is no longer fulfilling its protective functions following the damage. Now, clearly he knew. He's the guy who let him in to take that picture, or took the picture and shared it on Twitter or something. He's the guy who knew, right, unequivocally, that it was over the maintenance area. Right, there's no doubt about this, that he's the guy, right, the chief engineer, Chucky baby, stated the shelter is no longer fulfilling its protective function following the damage, when clearly the damage didn't compromise the function because it's over the maintenance area of the so-called shelter. It's not over, the hole is not in the sarcophagus itself, it's in the maintenance part of the building. The Kremlin spokesperson, Peskov, refuted Zelensky's allegations. Notice how Zelensky is getting quoted so much, suggesting it was likely a false flag, pointing out that they're known for such actions. It's unconscionable that they done this to themselves in order to try to keep the war going. The International Atomic Energy Agency confirmed that the drone strike did not penetrate the plant's inner containment shell. Well, wouldn't they have confirmed that it was in the maintenance area? Right, because this is a fancy way of saying this was in the maintenance area. They refused to say in the story it was the maintenance area. The world's worst nuclear disaster. How can it be worse than Chernobyl is absurd. Interesting engineer. If they don't know, who would know? The world's worst nuclear disaster. So again, you got all these straw man arguments. you kind of lose faith, right? And well, if you don't, then you're not paying attention. Here's reactor 3 at Fukushima. This was a plutonium mixed oxide reactor. That building is supposed to be 190 feet tall, 19 stories, 65 meters. The 2 reactor fuel pools with decades of reactor cores in each one were at the top of the building, not the bottom of the building. If you stop circulation of water, it melts down right away. There is no building there. It's just a stump. They only left that there so they can put a cover over it and claim that they were going to get fuel out of it. When clearly, and let me demonstrate. Let me show you exactly where the fuel pool. You can't call Chernobyl the world's worst nuclear accident. Each of the reactors in Chernobyl, Fukushima, is much worse than the other reactors at Japan's Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant, because it's a plutonium mixed oxide fuel reactors, reclaim uranium, reclaim plutonium. So the emissions from a nuclear meltdown or a nuclear fuel pool are 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison. The emissions from a plutonium mixed oxide is 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison. So the reactor and the fuel pools are at the top, not the exact top, but almost at the very top of these 190-foot, 19-story, 65-meter buildings. That's not supposed to be there. Ukraine says, that's for my next show, not the next show, but the show after. Ukraine says Russia drone attack hit Chernobyl's nuclear plant, and the radiation levels are normal. Really? Because it's the maintenance area. They're not stood up in the sarcophagus, looking up at a hole. They're stood up in the maintenance area, the front part of the building, looking at a superficial hole. Right? You know I'm right. And that's why we got that poll tonight, to help articulate the truth. Would Zelensky order a superficial attack on Chernobyl to gain support at the Munich Security Conference? It was up and running for 2 hours when this happened. It's incredible timing if it wasn't a false flag. It was perfect timing if it's not a false flag, wasn't it? Make sure you give me a yes on that first. So this is superficial damage. But here's the security expert for Chernobyl claiming the integrity of the building is no longer assured, is damaged, and that radiation is going to get out. How despicable are these people at all? How can you ever trust them again? And should they be removed from their positions? And should be held accountable? Should they lose their degrees for making these absurd assertions? Ahead of the Munich Security Conference on Friday, they said that Ukraine will give a lot of information to our American partners about the overnight attack and that the threats to the nuclear safety. It was actually happened 2 hours into the Munich Security Conference itself. It came hours before the beginning of the high-level Munich Security Conference. But the media has different versions of this. So when you look at the pictures of it, nothing came down through that. That was an explosion outward. And if you zoom in on the middle, I'm not going to do it tonight. I'm not set up for it, unfortunately. I don't remember if I set things up, so because we had problems earlier, right? But clearly, when you look at the metal up at the very top, it's shredded. It's still hanging there. It's not a warhead. And not only that, you don't see charcoal. You're not seeing like damage from smoke damage. It's completely missing, by the way, from everything in this picture. And look at this. So it's not very hard for someone to climb up there that day and put a improvised explosive device in the maintenance part of the roof there and then detonate it. When you zoom in on it, it's clear that this wasn't a high explosive coming in the building. It's an explosion going out of the building. A drone pierced the outer shell of Ukraine's Chernobyl nuclear plant. Radiation levels are normal. Now, when you look at the picture, a drone armed with a warhead. When you're looking at the hole to it, it's an easy fix. It's a mindless job to fix that. You're going to clean up the edges, put your plywood across it, 12 feet by 8 foot chunks of plywood, and then you're just going to 2x4 that into place with sheet metal screws, and then you're going to take that spray foam, because that's like epoxy, and you just go around the whole thing, and now it's sealed till summertime, right? There's no risk of radiation getting out of it because it's in the maintenance part of the building. It's not in the sarcophagus itself. Does that make any sense? Does that make any sense at all? Is it a crime to want to be watered twice a day? A drone went through the outer shell of Ukraine's Chornobyl nuclear plant, and so all the media come out with the same story, and it's Chernobyl, the world's worst nuclear accident narrative. Simply not true, right? This was clearly an explosion outward, not inward. That engine was laid there. It didn't actually happen. And I showed you the video at the beginning. I will show you again coming up. This is not a drone strike. This is a self-inflicted wound by Ukraine to get sympathy from the Munich Security Conference. And I'm pretty sure it probably worked, because all the media, which most of it is owned by the military-industrial complex itself, and that any engineer out there would have looked at this, or anybody in the nuclear industry, and there's thousands of people worked on that. They all would have known that this was the maintenance area immediately. The minute they saw it, they would have said, well, that's the maintenance area. The maintenance part of the building. Being a parasite is easy. Being honest, apparently, is one of the hardest things that anybody's ever had to do. When it comes to journalism, anyway. Russian drone strike damages Chernobyl nuclear plant shelter. I just despise this rat. He's destroyed his whole country. When the Russian-Ukraine kicked off, I made a video saying Zelensky should surrender rather than destroy their entire country. And right away, they shipped millions of people out of the country. Just dirty friggin'... There was 90 other wars going on at the same time. Why should Russia and Ukraine get all the attention when you had 90 other conflicts going on at the same time? Truly, the most horrible person in Ukraine is that fucking creature right there. Ukraine President Zelensky reported the attack targeted the shelter covering the plant's destroyed fort reactor, causing a fire. It didn't target it. This was a false flag event. Clearly the evidence is showing a false flag event that was later brought under control. So the story is written to give the impression that Chernobyl was melting down again, right? These journalists should lose their degrees for doing this. Chernobyl, known for the catastrophic 1986 disaster that released radiation across North America. Oh, really? Have you seen what Fukushima fucking done? Hey, buddy. Let me give you some concept of it, by the way. Here's what Fukushima done. This is just a fraction of it now, mind you. This was the French government at 1 million to 10 million atoms per cubic meter of air times what it was before. So you're talking about 30 to 40 million atoms of cesium-137 per cubic meter of air covering the entire planet. And let me show you the updated version of that. That model is only based on 8 days of radioactive fallout, right? Doesn't do it justice. But if you give me a few seconds, I'll bring up the updated version from the French government, the IRSN. There's this model. I'm going to snap ahead to 20 days. That's 20 days right there. This model stops at 30 days of radioactive fallout from Fukushima. The entire planet covered in 20 days at 1 million to 10 million atoms of cesium-137 per cubic meter of air. And cesium-137 pulses energy 600 feet every second for 300 years. But you can't have that plume without all the other isotopes, 1,000 other fission products. So clearly, and this is pictures from the media that are claiming that the containment is damaged. So how are you going to get in and take pictures when the containment is damaged? But clearly this is the maintenance area, it's the front part of the building. It's actually a pretty big maintenance area in the front of the building. And then they got a convenient set of steps going up to a platform so they can lay their explosion. It's pretty convenient. The explosion is right alongside the spot where the stairs goes right up to the ceiling, isn't it? Total coincidence, Dana. Despite the significant, and it's not significant damage at all. Significant damage. Zelensky confirmed the radiation levels have not risen. No, because it's not part of the sarcophagus. It's on the other side of the wall. President Zelensky confirmed. All the media were doing that, by the way. Ukraine's state emergency services also stated the radiation levels in the area remain within their usual brutal limits. And on Friday, the Chernobyl's chief engineer told Ukraine state media that the shelter ceased to fulfill its function due to the damage. We know that that's not true, right? Right? This damage has nothing to do with the actual integrity of the sarcophagus. This is on the other side of the wall where the maintenance is done. Does the truth matter? Apparently not. Here we go. I'll keep going here. The situation would remain controlled, they assured him. And noted that the repairs could take a considerable time and effort. Really? It's going to take a considerable time and effort? Just hang on 1 second here. How is that going to take a considerable time and effort? I just want to click that up again here. Okay, here we keep going. Kremlin spokesperson Peskov denied any Russian involvement in the attack. I don't know why Russians don't just assassinate Zelensky. That guy should be assassinated, purely. And Director General Grossi stated that every principle of nuclear safety has been violated. Rafael Grossi is one of the most disgusting parasites in human history, period. Like, I done a whole show on him last night. And next Sunday's show is going to be on him too. The reported attack on Friday took place just 2 days, because my shows are typically Sunday to Thursday. Today's Thursday. We're on to here in Canada, and I was pretty busted up this week. I slept all day yesterday, except for a little bit. Slept all day today because my brain wouldn't let me do anything, and just barely able to do a show tonight. I'm hoping the weekend. We got snow tomorrow, but we got 75. Winds are going to be blowing 75. Again. It's absurd. Every time we get snow, it's brutal wind. We haven't had a single snowfall that just comes down. That's usually what the majority of the snowfall does, is it just falls down, right? You can get on your skidoo and you can go out and look for species and tracks and everything. We're getting 75 kilometers an hour. which leaves bare places for hundreds and hundreds of feet at a time, and creates drifts that the Skidoo doesn't like very much. And that, earlier there, like a month ago, I welded a winch onto the. I put that video up there on this site here. I'd welded a winch onto the back of the Skidoo because you're out there by yourself, right, doing research, doing the field studies. Their discussion came ahead of a possible peace talk aimed at ending nearly 3 years of war. So the reported attack on Friday took place just 2 days after Russia and United States presidents had a lengthy and highly productive phone discussion came ahead of a possible peace talk. So Zelensky doesn't want the war to end. So during the Munich security conference, they carried out a false flag attack in the hopes of prolonging the war. That's what's actually going on, right? And Russia didn't. Ukraine started the war, not Russia. Right? Ukraine let the bioweapon labs, and they acknowledged it and admitted it. There was at least 5 biolabs from the United States in Ukraine. If Mexico, or say if Cuba, allowed 5 Russian biolabs in Ukraine or Cuba, Americans would invade Cuba, right? It's no different. In an interview with the Wall Street Journal on Thursday, U.S. Vice President Vance said that deploying American troops to Ukraine remains on the table. But apparently that's not true either. In 1986, Unit 4 Chornobyl on the border of Ukraine and Belarus exploded, leading to a catastrophic radioactive disaster, and a reactor was later enclosed in cement and steel structure called a sarcophagus. It was actually 600 helicopter pilots died in the first 2 weeks, every one of them, all 600 helicopter pilots. They were dropping boron and acid, or lead, onto the inferno. I mean, they kidnapped 1 million people off the streets with buses and guns to bring to Chornobyl. And when they were clearing the graphite off the roof of reactor 4, the homeless and destitute and the victims they snatched off the streets would only go out on the roof for 25 seconds. Pick up, the worst thing you could ever do is pick up some of the fuel and throw it off the roof of the building. It was the most idiotic thing you could do. They sacrificed 1 million people. And everybody got a tiny pension, right? None of it was enough to bring them to console them or their families. Chief of Staff to Zelensky, the monster, pointed out the United States had invested a lot of money and effort in building the sarcophagus. So they're playing on that sediment. The International Atomic Energy Agency reported that his team replied to the explosion within minutes, which of course whoever set the explosives inside of it to start the false flag event knew. So clearly, it wouldn't surprise me for 1 second if the International Atomic Energy Agency are the ones who done it, because they're not coming out and saying that there was no damage to the sarcophagus. They're remaining silent. So that's guilt by association, right? So if like a crime is still a crime, no matter where it takes place, and every one of them acted as a guilty person, then what are we left with? Ukraine's military reported that Russia launched 133 drones in an overnight attack, and of them, 73 were shot down, and 58 didn't reach their targets. So now they're putting out this seed of doubt that one of them might have accidentally went off route and hit Chornobyl. But that's not what happened either, is it? That's not what happened. This was an explosion from the inside, period. And this is how they done it. Look, right there. They went up the stairs, climbed up in the rafters, put their bomb into the insulation above it, and then they set it off just before the security conference or as it was happening. Which seems to be the consensus of what I'm reading anyway. 58 failed to reach their target. It occurred just hours before the high-level Munich Security Conference, where Vice President Vance from the United States is scheduled to meet with Zelensky, and where there's all kinds of other influential degenerates. This is hilarious pictures. Guns at a nuclear meltdown site, eh? After a drone armed with a warhead. Well, this is not the damage of a warhead. This is the damage of a staged false flag event. Period. Bar nothing. That's not a warhead damage we're looking at, okay? That's a staged event. And this explosion was from the inside, and you can see the damage. Everything is peeled backwards outside. The drones are not meant to penetrate these types of buildings, so they have the damage would have been completely different. It would have been even less superficial. After a drone armed with a warhead, the timing is sensitive. The incident comes against the backdrop of the Munich Security Conference, a gathering of world leaders meant to hash out a path to ending the 3-year war. So, attack upon the nuclear plant is a good way to, in Zelensky's compartmentalized idiot shell of a head, of maintaining or prolonging the conflict to loot. You know, when this started, remember, here in Canada it was gross. The Girl Scouts were out there selling cookies to send money to Zelensky so he can buy weapons. Little children were donating on camera in the media. We're going to schools where little children were cracking open their piggy banks so they could send the money to Zelensky. That's how heavy the brainwashing was. It was revolting. You couldn't go anywhere without flags, and you still can't, of Ukraine. You got to support Ukraine. And people, when they're told by TV and they're indoctrinated their whole life by an idiot box, are told to do something, they do it without even thinking about it. There's no independent thinking skills. The critical thinking skills of the average person is non-existent, which frightens the shit out of me all the time, by the way. Their competing claims cannot be independently verified. Russia denied the involvement and accused Ukraine of waging a false flag attack, and that couldn't be independently verified. Well, why not? Clearly, when you look at the evidence, that's a false flag staged event. If you had a forensic investigative journalist anywhere on the planet that was going to write about this and be honest, they would have the same evidence as I'm showing you. They would come up with the same conclusion. This is not a warhead that does something like that. That's frig all damage. That damage is laughable, man. And then you got the head of security at Chornobyl saying they might have to roll the whole shelter back to fix that hole. Just to artificially inflate and pretend that there's enormous damage when there's just superficial damage. There should be a penalty for these people as an incentive not to do this again. And so Russia should target that piece of shit too. The timing is sensitive as the incident comes against the backdrop of the Munich Security Conference. Russia denied the involvement, accusing them of a false flag attack, and that's exactly what we're seeing. But it couldn't be verified because media can't verify the truth. They can only verify a false staged event that they've done themselves. They want to tell you that, rather. Chernobyl, the site of the world's worst nuclear accident. You got to put that in there just to be an extra piece of shit, right? Chernobyl is the furthest thing from the world's worst nuclear accident. The plant is bad. I mean, they closed 9,400 farms in Ireland, Scotland, United Kingdom. 3,000 kilometers away. Because that's what radioactive fallout is actually really like, see? Chernobyl, they should have closed all the farms on the planet. Or Fukushima, I meant they should have closed all the farms on the planet. The plant houses spent fuel. Wait, what's this? The site housed spent fuel. If Russia was going to target it, that's what they would have targeted, because there's no containment around the spent fuel, right? Why would Russia do that? They live right alongside of it. Nuclear safety experts have told the Associated Degenerate Press, which CIA rather, that the internal radioactive decay continues for thousands of years inside the fuel rods. The problem with the fuel rods is they're splitting atoms. There's no containment at any fuel pool on the planet. There's 1,000 fuel pools worldwide. They're hemorrhaging the atoms into the environment because they're splitting atoms. They're splitting the same amount of atoms they used to split to power 1 million homes and businesses every day, are released directly into the environment, which are, every nuclear power plant is surrounded by farms. Because it's like a banana and a potato chip, right? No, because they hate your guts and because they're evil. That's who they are. They're just, if you're looking for the devil on earth, you look at the nuclear industry, you look at the fuel pools, you look at the International Atomic Energy Agency. If you're actually looking for real life demons and the devil, that's who you're looking at. These are absolutely devils, and demons, and monsters. There's no other way to describe the nuclear industry. The emissions attack everything with replicating cells. So all 8 million species, anything with replicating cells is under siege, and eventually it'll sterilize every species on the planet. You don't need a nuclear meltdown, you just need nuclear fuel pools. The fuel rods are in cooling pools. They boil off 120,000 liters in each pool a day, and each liter is going to be hundreds of trillions of anthropogenic, man-made, nasty isotopes released directly into the environment. They're not cooled by water and electric power heat exchange pumps, per se. That's just maintenance. You can't physically cool these things. They're splitting atoms. Just the worst thing can happen to a planet is a fuel rod. The degenerate Swedish Radiation Safety Authority and others estimated the power outage at Chornobyl would not lead to a risky radiation incidents for at least a couple of weeks. That's because the fuel storage ponds are very deep. They're not that deep. They'll boil if the fuel is exposed, the fuel rod is exposed to zirconium cladding. Inside the zirconium claddings, the fuel rods that are cladded with zirconium are zirconium-cladded plutonium-uranium pellets. The fuel rod, if it's exposed to air, it catches fire immediately. It flashes. At 1800 degrees, it'll burn. That'll ignite the uranium-plutonium pellets, which are coated also with zirconium cladding. Then the uranium-plutonium will burn at 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures. That will flash the fuel pool dry. So then all the reactor cores that are in that fuel pool now will create so much hydrogen, if you introduce oxygen or a spark, that'll detonate. And of course, what does zirconium do? It catches fires when it's exposed to air, so it'll explode. So the explosions seen at Fukushima were the proof that you had a nuclear meltdown. It doesn't take a long time for the water inside of them to, as they call it, boil down. It boils off. It already evaporates 120,000 liters in 24 hours. So after about 3 days, like if you stop the circulation, it'll melt down in about 5 hours. You don't need the water to disappear. You just got to stop the circulation of the water. Even if the cooling pumps were to stop. No, if the cooling pump stops, it melts down in about 5 hours. That's the consensus of the academic world pre-Fukushima anyway. A lack of electricity would blind the International Atomic Energy Agency's radiation monitoring system installed to boost security. They're the worst humans in history are the International Atomic Energy Agency and IRPA and ONSCLEAR and the IPRC and every other one of the United Nations little idiot machines. And even if experts say a drone or missile strike is unlikely to trigger a major radioactive release, at least not without giving authorities time to take action. You can't take action when there's a meltdown. You run away. All these drills you see at nuclear power plants in case of an accident, if it happens, they run away. You can't do nothing. The gamma shine kills you from hundreds of feet away. The neutron bombardments will kill you from hundreds of feet away. The alpha burst, the gamma shines, the neutron, the beta rays, the X-rays will all melt your organs in just minutes. You can't do nothing in that environment. Right there. There's nothing on the planet that has an autoimmune trigger that can defend against anthropogenic man-made radiation, period. It's not up for debate. The power shutoff or the deliberate targeting of nuclear plants during the war can still cause significant panic and undermine peace efforts. A power shutoff means you're going to have a meltdown in about 5 hours. Like the cooling, the water circulation rather, in these fuel pools which have decades of reactor cores stored into them, you're talking about a massive inventory. Put in risk poisoning Europe as the missile strike breaks Chernobyl. MSN, that's some massive media everywhere. It's simply not true. These stories weren't true. None of these stories were true. These were artificially inflated stories in order to prolong the Russian-Ukraine war, because the United States president and the Russia president were talking about ending it. And so there's big money in misery machines and wars, right? Put in risk poisoning Europe as the missile strike breaks Chernobyl nuclear reactor cover. It didn't break the cover. It punched a hole from the inside out. It was a false flag event of the maintenance part of the building, not the actual sarcophagus part of the building. And they show you this. They don't even show you, right, the new sarcophagus, the containment. A Russian drone carrying a high explosive warhead done fuck all damage, because there was no Russian drone. This was an explosion from the inside. And we know that because we have a ridiculous amount of documentation to back up that assertion. An overwhelming amount, actually. And when you look at any engineer, any architect that looks at this, says the damage was outward, not inward. Duh. The Russian drone carrying a high explosive warhead. You hear the same. Every media ran there with the basic same story, right? The accusation of a Russian drone came today from Zelensky, amid the United States president's attempt to broker a peace agreement in the 3-year war. Zelensky said the blaze has been extinguished and radiation is so far normal. And monitoring doesn't need to continue because it's in the maintenance part of the building, not the sarcophagus part of the building. And this was confirmed by the International Atomic Energy Agency, who knew unequivocally that this wasn't in the sarcophagus, that this was actually in the maintenance part of the building, and it had no implications whatsoever. Zero. It had fucking zero implications. And all the media came out and cut your throat, every one of them, and showed you the pictures. No smoke damage. Because it's an explosion that blew it outward, not inward. Ukraine built this shelter together with other countries in Europe and the world, and together with America and everyone who wants real security for people. Talk about a worthless human to say something like that. And then Ukraine says this is a terrorist threat to the entire world. The shelter at Chernobyl was damaged by the drone. The fire was extinguished. None of it was true. It's not a terrorist threat to the entire world. Ukraine is a terrorist threat to the entire world by staging a false flag event. And they said the damage to the shelter is significant. But what are you talking about? How can you call that significant? It's like 10 feet by 12 feet. You punched a hole out through the roof. And the damage dictates that is exactly what happened to the roof. There was no immediate proof today of the type of drone which allegedly hit the covering to the exploded reactor, because some journalists had pains of conscience. Look. And the very last sentence of the paragraph, they were like, well, actually, there's no proof. The very last sentence in the story. If you read the whole fucking story, and I read 27 of them. So I really, really disrespect journalists. Again. Russia drone strike damages Chernobyl nuclear disease factory, causing a fire that was brought under control. Well, where's the smoke damage? Where's the evidence there was a fire? And there was nothing there to fucking burn. Do you see anything there that can fucking burn? Excuse me, I get a little bit upset. I'm a little bit excited here. Despite the significant damage to the shelter. That's very offensive to say there's significant damage to a shelter when there's not. This was a staged event, clearly. There's a potential risk of a radioactive substance that's been released. No, there is no potential whatsoever because it's in the maintenance part of the building. That repairs can take a considerable amount of time and effort. Apparently not. We've seen all the pictures, inside, outside. Even a carpenter loaded on vodka can manage to fix that up in 4 or 5 hours. Attack occurred just before the high-level Munich security conference, where Zelensky was going to go there and beg for people to give him money so he can put it in his Swiss bank accounts. What is it, like $100 billion is missing each year or something? Trump, unexpected phone call with Vladimir Putin on Wednesday raised concern in Europe about the possibility of a dirty deal, raised concerns about the war would end. No, that's a dirty deal, Dana. And terms that favor Moscow. Well, that's who's winning the so-called war, isn't it? A dirty deal. So let's destroy everything in Ukraine, and when the war ends, there's nothing left, but you can say Zelensky won. Is that what you're going to do? And you think he's going to stay there? He's going to get on his private jet and fly down to wherever they got their Bugatti to, and their chalets and their castles and their mansions in the States and up in Germany, where he bought Hitler's mansion up in Germany on top of that. He got so much money, he's buying everything. Russia drone attack hits Chernobyl nuclear disease factory. The attack comes 2 days after Russia president, United States president, held a lengthy and highly productive telephone call ahead of potential peace talks. And that's just the way it is, right? Telling a lie. Well, what was this picture about right there, I wonder? Is somebody over there? I don't know what to make of that one. I think I zoomed in on it or something. So you got barbed wire fence right there. Because you got to keep people out of a nuclear meltdown, do you? And you got some guy up there that when I zoom in on him, he doesn't make any sense to me at all. Well, clearly he's got a gun hanging off his back. The site of the world's worst civil nuclear catastrophe. How can you say for even a split second that Chernobyl is even equal to Fukushima, yet let alone worse than Fukushima? One, a Chernobyl forum, Chernobyl reactor exploded. Well, first off, Fukushima had 4 reactors melt down. That's just 2 of them. They're way worse, way bigger than Chernobyl, by the way. Each of these reactors released 100 Chernobyls because they're pure uranium, pure plutonium. And just because the media claimed that they're on top of a building that don't exist doesn't mean it didn't happen. And the whole world's seen that picture. That's reactor 3, for instance. But yet here they are in 2021 claiming that they're looking at a fuel pool on top of a building that doesn't even exist. Because the fuel pools are at the very top of the buildings. I mean, the footage, when you look at the building, there is no building. It's hard to appreciate how big the buildings really are when you're looking at this. But you're talking about 19 stories, 190 foot, 65-meter buildings that don't even exist. Even a statement here, doomsday-like radiation released with the fire in the pool at Unit 4 would be a global catastrophe. Well, Unit 4 doesn't even exist when they were saying this. Nor does Unit 3 right alongside of it, Unit 2 or Unit 1. Former Fukushima Daiichi worker, I believe the country would be evacuated if the number 4 fuel pool collapsed. Well, it ain't even there. It collapsed immediately on day 5. It's gone. Everything is gone. Like when you compare Chernobyl to Fukushima, just a single reactor from Fukushima. And at the top of each of Fukushima's reactors were 8 more reactor cores and 2 fuel pools. So you're talking about 9 reactor cores were gone. And reactor 4, of course, they refused to acknowledge this even happened. There were 16,000 people quit work there. These were the homeless and the destitute and the victims of society, the immigrants that don't speak the language. They couldn't even get close to the stacks, the skinny stacks where they pump the emissions from the fuel pool into the farms that are surrounding these sites. This is a stupid industry. It really is a stupid industry. Like they have plumes, like in reactor 1 and 2, big chunks of it went China syndrome down into the earth and hit the water table, split the earth open in 6 places where the steam coming out of the ground was measured at 10 sieverts per hour. 3 sieverts is a lethal dose, by the way, just walking past it. But the steam drove everybody off the site many, many times. They've abandoned that site endless times. We have all that documentation. You can go to my playlist and see all of it. So what was interesting about Chernobyl was when they constructed, let me go back to that, when they constructed the so-called sarcophagus, that's not really going to work because you're 30 years too late. The structure was officially completed and handed over to the Ukraine government in 2019, with the ceremony being attended by President Zelensky. So what's the odds that he would order, because that had played a lot of significance in his mind, right? $1.7 billion from 48 countries. He's seen that as a way to unite a bunch of countries to maintain the war. He wants the war to continue on. He doesn't want the war to end. Because this is a false flag, and he staged it. Period. Shoo. Like I can show you so much on Chernobyl. You should go read or watch, if you've never been here before, you should go watch my anniversary videos on Chernobyl. I got 2 of them in particular. If you watch 2 of them, you get over 900 academic studies where they studied every facet of the biosphere and the ecosystem in order to downplay it. But it shows you how this permeates and destroys the entire ecosystem. It's unbelievably disturbing. Excuse me. Well, we made it anyway. That's the show. I noticed James got a new song out there before we went live tonight. I put a link in the show. We're going to play that song. And his song from yesterday, of course. Man, that's I just love that song so much. You got a wonderful song here tonight. It's fantastic. Another great win for humanity. We're so fortunate, eh? To have all this anti-nuclear music. Now I got to chop up a whole bunch of his videos for the last number of weeks and use the videos and when we're doing this stuff. I got to spend like 6, 7, 8 hours doing it. And I got to label everything and put everything in a spot where I can just go in and type in what I'm looking for and be able to find the appropriate one. And I'll get there. And that's going to be epic because the kind of stuff that he's making is through AI, these videos, and I can't find that stuff anywhere. And there's no way I can do that good of a job myself. I'm pretty good, but I ain't that good. And why should I go through all that work when somebody's already done it? I friggin' love that stuff, man. You have no idea. People have no idea how much I love that stuff. Okay, well, we made it through another week. We'll come in and close the poll after. Would Zelensky order a superficial attack on Chernobyl to gain support at the Munich Security Conference? I mean, it's clear that this was a staged false flag event. It's crystal clear. You have to be pretty insane to deny the truth. We're not insane. We're not going to... So that's a pillow. Not a pillow, but like a cushion. And that's to front and back of my one of my T-shirts. Would you rather have birds and bees or nuclear power? I just love that statement, eh? And that's a wonderful statement. And just trying to get set up. So that was last night. You really want to watch that video too, folks, if you like anti-nuclear music. He's got so much. It's just amazing. So UN Watchdog and Pony Show. Another fantastic song. Bless your heart, James. We'll leave you on that tonight. Have a great night. Hugs for everybody. We'll see everybody on the next show, which you never know with me. If there's an event, it'll be the next day. But Sunday, I'm still recovering from screwing myself up over the last 2 weeks. I'm doing much better. So we done a show last night and the show tonight. That makes me feel good. Have a great night and a great weekend. Hugs for everybody. And don't believe the propaganda. And don't believe anything the nuclear industry tells you. I'm going to go set the quality of the video to 1080. I'll turn the audio back on. And then we'll play the video. Have a great night. Hugs for everybody. If anybody could donate, you'll find the links in the bottom of the description for 2 links to donate. We never had an issue with it. I think I'm having a few problems, though, with my website one for credit cards. You have to donate. You can use the same cards at PayPal. The link below is directly to my PayPal. You have a great night. Have a great weekend. Hugs for everybody, and we'll see you on the next show.
5 times they've come, 5 times they've gone, dressed in paper suits, moving along. Clipboards full, but the questions stay. This land's still marked, but they look away. They stand by the gates where the black bags rise. 10 stadiums deep, stacked to the sky. Trucks haul the dirt where no one will see. A cleanup on paper, a crisis set free. Grossi steps forward, rehearsed and refined. Hands never tremble, toes the same line. They call this progress, they call it a win, but the fuel still waits where the work begins. They scrape the soil, they burn the ash, stack up the waste, then bury the past. 2045 is when they say it'll go, but today it's just talk for a TV show. but trust is dust. Carbon-free